Chief Whip for the Parliamentary Opposition, People's Progressive Party Civic, and the People's Progressive Party. On this program, we shall focus on matters of public importance, bring you information, discussion on matters and issues that of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. And as normal, before we get into the program, I remind you of the telephone numbers to call, 225-0010 and 225-008. And as usual, if your number's blocked, I won't be able to answer your call on the program. I can only answer where the numbers are coming up on my phone here. As I always remind you that obviously the opposition is open Monday to Saturday, and that you're free to pop in if you need advice, you want to talk to someone about something that's bothering you, and that you need to know where to go, how to get things done. We're there to serve you, the Guyanese public, and so we're at 304 Church Street between New Garden and Peter Rose Street, Queenstown, just directly opposite Border Cricket Ground. And our telephone number there, 225-3432, if you wish to call to speak to anybody or you'd like to make an appointment to come in. You can also just drop in if you like. Some of you may not be familiar with Freedom Radio. Freedom Radio continues to broadcast FM 91.1 Demerara, 90.5 Berbice, 90.7 Essequibo. So we continue to try and keep people in the country areas au fait with what's going on. And of course the Mirror newspaper, which has been around now for a very, very long time. It's one of the oldest newspapers. It is the oldest newspaper right now in existence in Guyana. And that we're moving to provide an online service where you can subscribe online. And we will be sharing that out free. So I'll keep you up to date on that. Well, we've started, and I see there's some talk about preparations for MASH on the 40th anniversary. However, just to repeat from last week, we focused on the UN Secretary General's decision to take the border contention by Venezuela that the 1899 Arbiter Award on Guyana's territory is null and void to the International Court of Justice. And I repeat what I said then, that all Guyanese should welcome the UN Secretary General's decision. It has been a long road to get to this point, and we remain convinced that we must work towards peaceful relations with Venezuela as our neighbor and sister Latin American Caribbean country. As it is, some people may think this is a rapid process, but just to give you a reminder that it's in 2014 that the then President Ramatar, through the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, approached the United Nations Secretary General with the view that all the efforts of the good officers, etc., were bringing no results, and that Guyana was seeking to go to the International Court of Justice to have a final resolution on the claims by Venezuela. And so it is taken from 2014 right through to now, and it is a good decision. However, there is no rapid results on this, in that it will take several years before the ICJ, before this matter is finally, that they give their ruling. And of course, the second issue we focused on last week was the Commission of Inquiry into the Lindo Creek and the swearing in on January 31st by Mr. Retired Justice Donald Trotman, who is the father of Minister Raphael Trotman, who is also the leader of the AFC. And so I wanted to maybe, because some of you may not be clear how a Commission of Inquiry is established. The Commission of Inquiry Act provides the mechanisms for the manner in which the President will appoint a Commission of Inquiry, and also that the Commission of Inquiry, once he decides to go in that direction, has to have an order which has its seal and the seal number, which is then gazetted with the signature of the President that says he's appointing a commission to do X, Y, and Z. Here are the members of the commission. Here are the terms of reference of the commission. And so since January 31st, when Mr. Trotman was sworn in, Justice Trotman was sworn in, we have been looking every day on the official Gazette website to see what were the terms of reference that Mr. Justice Trotman was given, what were the guidelines, what were his parameters, And by the way, this was done with the Walter Rodney Commission, the Linden disturbances, and a number of other commissions established by this government. However, it is only today, February the 8th, that the Commission inquiry terms of reference has been posted on the official Gazette Guyana website. And as of last night, there were no hard copies that were available in relation to the Commission inquiry and its terms of reference. However, on the website, has been dated February 1st. And the Commission inquiry, according to the reports in the media, said they started working on the same day. Now, this may look as if we're nitpicking, but these are one of many examples where the government is eking away at the constitutional legal framework of the country. For some people, this may not be a big issue. So what? It's sworn in January 31st, and the Gazette carries it February the 8th, but dated back to February 1st. The problem is that commissions inquiry are public. The parameters in which the president must comply is defined by statute and by the Constitution, and therefore 8 days after the appointment of the commissioner, 8 days after the commissioner is already saying that he's going to be flying into Linden Creek and going into different areas, that is when the terms of reference of the Commission inquiry become public. And what is also interesting is that the Commission inquiry, which, as I said, was only posted up today, and I've been checking every day, it's a Commission inquiry seal number 7 and 8 of 2018. And of course, the President signs that he has constituted a commission purpose, constituted a commission for the purpose of inquiring into the circumstances surrounding the killing of the 8 men, etc., and to report the findings and recommendations to His Excellency the President. In the document, which is now the Rules of Procedure and the Terms of Reference, then it points out that the Commission actually starts its work on February 1st, and that is expected to report within a particular time. It also points out that the Commissioner shall conduct its inquiry at the conference room of the Department of Public Service, Ministry of Presidency, 164 Waterloo Street. So we'll look out for those ads. And of course, the Commissioner can invite anybody to come before them. What is really interesting about the document they posted is that this is signed. This, according to the very last parts of the seal, 7 and 8, point out this is done by the Ministry of the Presidency, Georgetown, Guyana, this 14th day of July 2016 in the 47th year of the Republic. Well, first of all, the 47th year of the Republic is not 2016, it's 2017, and that this is not the 14th day of July 2016. This was put up on February the 1st, 2018. So again, somebody doesn't read carefully what they put up on what are such important instruments that determine people's lives and investigate it, etc. So, Mr. Trotman, I hope, will have noticed this and bring this for correction and notice to the Office of the President. But anyway, the Commission, therefore, has finally put its gazetted version forward. We are not opposed, the PPC is not opposed to a Commission inquiry on the violent crime wave 2002-2008. In fact, it has supported and it supports an international panel, as was done in the case of the 2012 Commission inquiry on Walter Rodney and the 2012 Commission inquiry into the Linden disturbances, with a bipartisan approach and agreement on the terms of reference. In addition to that, in 2012, when Mr. Granger had brought the motion for a Commission inquiry, not an international one, we called for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which we felt that would at that time been helpful. But we are not opposed to a Commission inquiry on the level like Walter Rodney, where you have a full international panel of highly respected jurists to oversee and to manage and to come with recommendations. And we hope too that, like some of these commission's inquiries, it won't happen like with Walter Rodney, that the commission inquiry was aborted by the president, when in fact there were a number of 10, 12 names pending to come before the commission, some to be recalled to the commission, including high officials of the government, including, I believe, Mr. Granger and Dr. Rupert Narayan. So that's Lindo Creek. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep examining what's going on. But clearly, from the very first go, the government cannot get it right in relation getting the commission inquiry terms of reference out to the public for those who may have an interest in going before the commission or even to know what is going on. Well, we've been focusing all of January on the sugar workers. And January 31st came, and a number of the workers got their severance pay. Those who were whose severance pay was going to be $500,000 or less. Some had difficulties cashing their checks, a number of bureaucratic hurdles, and those who were only getting half payment, a number of them got those, and they will have to wait until sometime in the last 6 months of 2018 to be told when they're going to get the second half. Our position remains as a PPPC that the workers are entitled to. This is money they've earned. This is not a gift. This is not a handout by the government. This is money they've earned under the labor laws of our country, that having been made redundant, they weren't fired because of misbehavior or coming late or doing anything wrong. They were made redundant because the government decided to close down these estates. And therefore they're entitled to a severance pay. Many of them have worked 10, 20, and 30 years in the industry. This is their money that they have earned. This is not a gift from the government. This is not a handout from anybody. This is money, I repeat, that they earned and are due to them. So 5,000 workers and more, because as you know, just near the end of January, the Guy Succo announced that there will be another 957 will be going, of which 300 would go before the end of January, and the balance would go between end of January and early March. So that's another 1,000 coming on board. But of those who received severance pay, this is those who received all of the severance pay, how many of the over 5,000 workers benefited from this? And the numbers of those who earn less than 500,000 and 500,000 is approximately 1,400, 1,500 workers. This is a smaller percentage of those who are actually lost their jobs. So it means that if a man has worked and his severance pay is 510,000, just a little over the 500,000, he will be given half of that severance pay, would have been given half of that severance pay before the end of January, and then would have to wait for the balance until sometime in the 6 months at the end of the year. No date has been given, no month has been given for the payment of the second installment of their severance pay. So, but in the face of all this, so if someone was getting 510,000, they're going to get half before the end of January. That's 260,000. So they now have to wait for the balance sometime in the last 6 months of 2018. However, we have heard what I believe are highly insulting and offensive statements by government ministers, pointing out that, you know, it's a good thing the workers are not getting their full severance, because then they would spend it out, and therefore it's best they must invest it, they must put it in, you know, some form of investment so that they will reap the benefits. And then you have, you know, Mr. Holder's statement in 2016 saying that when the sugar workers were calling for a salary increase, that if they get that, they would then drink it out in beers. So that, and then you have Ram Jatan's statement, you know, God willed this for sugar, and at the same time, God, you know, wanted sugar to fail, God also gave us oil. So this is where the offensiveness and the disrespect to sugar workers coming in, that somehow they don't know how to spend their money. Well, it's the same sugar workers who struggled all these years and who were able under the PPP to be able to fix their houses and be able to borrow money to have a TV and stove and gas stove or fridge, things that were not there before 92. The majority of sugar workers cooked on fireside, and fridge was a luxury. Televisions were not available then. And that's only 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago. So, to tell sugar workers who've struggled that they don't know how to manage their money, and the appearance of this severance pay having not worked, having not got any salary increases from 2015 to now, no API from 2015 to now, the calculation on the severance is based on what would have been no increases that they would have earned in 2.5 years. So you're telling people, and let's do some arithmetic. If you were one of those people that got only half, means that whatever your half was is less than 500,000. And therefore you're expected to manage that from February the 1st until sometime in 2018, sometime in the second half of 2018. But let's assume the government is generous and decides to pay the sugar workers the second and final part of their severance sometime in July. It means that February, March, April, May, June, 5 months, sugar workers will have to live on that. They have children, they have mortgages, they may have invested in a car, they may have borrowed money from the bank for a number of things, or they may have gone to courts and bought a TV or bought from hire purchase some things for their house. They also have kids to put to school. And if you have secondary kids, you have to find transportation for that, because most of the schools, the nursery primary schools, are within generally walking distance for the smaller children. But it means you have electricity, you have water. Majority of people in this country now have cell phones. Cell phones, we have over 600,000 cell phones in Ghana for a population of 747,000. So cell phones is an absolute necessity and something that people have, particularly where you may not have available landlines in many parts of the country. So that this money is expected to last 5 months, those who got half. For those who got all, those who are earning less than 500,000 in severance pay, and they got it all, how long is that money going to last? 5 months, 6 months, 7 months? Things are really going to bite the dust when that handout of money begins to fritter away, and when jobs are not available for many of the workers. We have, as a PPP, called on the government to do a number of things. We've said it on this program more than once. Give the people all of their severance pay as they're entitled to under the law. In addition to that, allocate land that the sugar workers can begin to do farming, cash crops, whatever they want to do with it, and don't deduct it from their severance pay as if they're paying for it. Find some way to give people some kind of financial assistance until they're able to get another job. It can be a small amount of money. We call on the government to do retraining and loans to the sugar workers. We have heard that the government has $100 million that they've set aside for the sugar workers. Well, that's approximately 5,000 accessing 100 million means that everyone will probably be able to access about $20,000 each as a loan. So that we have been calling also that why can't the sugar workers have some kind of subsidy? Not now the geographic areas, because Linden and Kokwani are geographic areas where the bauxite workers lived. And up to today, from the bad times of bauxite in the 70s, 80s, and the difficulties of the early 90s, that bauxite was given subsidized electricity. Today, up to today, February the 8th, 2018, the subsidy continues, and Linden and Kokwani pay the lowest rates of the entire country to do with electricity. Why can't the government give the 5,000 workers, they have their names, they have their addresses, because they have to do severance for them, give them some kind of subsidies for electricity. So it's not now to a community as in Linden and Kokwani, sorry, where those who are bauxite workers and those who aren't all benefit. We're talking about direct subsidies for the sugar workers on the scale and parallel to and similar to that which is given to Linden and Kokwani. We've also learned that, which is very, very distressful, that a lot of the sugar workers who have been dismissed or made redundant, who have been members of the dispensary, the clinics at the dispensaries on the sugar estates, who have turned up to get their regular monthly check, their monthly drugs, those who are diabetic, have heart problems and all these other issues, they have been turned away, being told that they're now dismissed, so they're not entitled to the health care that they would have gotten from the sugar estates. And again, I draw a parallel with bauxite, that we in PPPC, when Hoyt was president, he tried to start an unbundling bauxite because bauxite was in dire straits, actually much worse than sugar is today. And so he was beginning to unbundle it. And so what happened under Hoyt is he started giving a subvention to the ministry, to the Linden Hospital, Mackenzie Hospital, and so forth. When we got into government, the government of Guyana, Ministry of Health, took over the Linden and the Mackenzie hospitals, the Wisma hospitals, so that the workers would have, and other persons who weren't workers, continue to have the same access to health services as when those were run by the bauxite company. So too with the training school. The training school was put under the Ministry of Labor so that it could continue. The nursing school was absorbed into the nursing schools under the Ministry of Public Health, under the Ministry of Health. So that this was to ensure that there was continuity of services and that the people of those communities would not be disadvantaged by not being able to have access to those services once all these things were segregated from bauxite. And all the workers in health were brought over into the Ministry of Public Health at the same salaries they had been earning, which in many cases was higher than the public servants who were in health in those days. And this was negotiated with the unions, including people like Mr. Lincoln Lewis and others, Mr. Yard and others, to ensure that, one, the Linden nurses and doctors and so on, those in Region 10 would not be disadvantaged by coming onto the public health, public service position. That took several years to do. Unfortunately, this government has decided that that's too much trouble, that's too much time, they don't care. And so what is unclear is what's happening to the dispensaries that are in the sugar estates, which sugar workers have benefited from for years and years, for decades. And what's going to happen to those facilities? Is the government going to take them over and run them on behalf of those communities that surround these areas that are mainly sugar working people? So they can take it over, run it as a Ministry of Health primary health care unit, which is accessible now to sugar workers, former sugar workers, present sugar workers, and other workers and other people who may not be working in the sugar industry. There's been no discussion of that. The Gaisuko Training School has been a highly effective and well-recognized institution for producing good managers, good staff, and highly trained young professionals in the sugar industry. And many of them have moved into other sectors as well. What is happening to that institution? Because that has had a very good reputation, and therefore it should be absorbed into the training schools programs such as what exists either under the Ministry of Labor, technical vocational institutes, and or even based on the facilities, maybe even make it a special annex of the University of Guyana. But again, no discussion on that. These are not things being talked about. Basically, the government wants to wash its hands of sugar. Like Pontius Pilate. When Pontius Pilate washed his hands when they brought Jesus before him, what is supposed to do with Jesus? He washed his hands and said, send him to the next chapter. And so That's basically what's happening in sugar, in that the sugar workers, the plight of the sugar workers is of no concern to this government. No concern, no matter what the platitudes are. Fundamentally, it comes down to the position that these people can't manage their lives. In fact, even with the job fair that they had last week, which I think in some cases a number of people had good intentions to try to help, but many of the jobs that are available are not those that the bulk of the sugar workers who are field workers may be able to access. So it may have provided some opportunities for those in the clerical stream and some of the technical skills. But many of those who are in the field work may not be able to access some of those jobs. And therefore, whether it was a PR campaign or whether it was with good intentions, many sugar workers felt even probably more depressed after they left than when they first went. Well, in contrast to all the things I'm talking about in sugar, we have a major, big conference going on right now. Huge. Lots of PR on it, lots of glitzy stuff. The government is hosting the Guyana International Petroleum and Exhibition and Summit. GIPEX, G-I-P-X, Guyana International Petroleum Exhibition and Summit. So it's GIPEX, to address the oil and gas sector and to bring investors in, to attract investors. The conference is being organized by the Minister of Natural Resources, Go Invest, and a company called Valiant Media, I believe, one of whose clients is Exxon, and Sagacity, or Sagacity, I apologize for mispronouncing it, Sagacity, which has been hired by Valiant to be the PR for the company. And the cost, so this is to attempt to attract other investors, oil companies that are interested in Guyana, or those who are already here, ministries, private sector, etc. And the cost to attend this conference is $750 US per individual. And if you're coming with 3 members of a company, 4 members of a company, the price changes to what you would have to pay to enter the conference, to register in the conference. So whilst you have the plight of the sugar workers and the fact that the money they have is going to run out in a few months' time, and then what does the government have proposed for sugar? They promised many things about Wales, and a year has gone by. Nothing has happened in Wales. Wales is abandoned. It's a ghost place, absolute ghost place. It's scary that all these assets are just lying there. And of course, those that closed on December the 29th and 30th. The grass is taking over. It's a tropical country. The drains and everything are all being cluttered up. And NDIA, which we were told would take over the maintenance of the DNI and the backlands and the sugarlands, so that we in the city, we on the coast, wouldn't be so vulnerable to flooding. Well, of course, that arrangement seems to have fallen apart, according to the government and to Guy Succo. So what does that mean? First of all, for the sugar workers, many of them are looking forward to getting work with the NDIA to do the things they have been doing in the past in maintaining the DNI in the estates. However, as the government said, it fell apart. And in addition to that, you have the concern of those of us who live on the coast, that what will happen if you get some really heavy rains and those backlands and those drains and canals are clogged up, which I understand a month later are already getting full of grass and so on. So we have the contrast. Sugar workers, you have people suffering from cost of living is going up on every item. 10 to 25,000 people have lost their job, including these 5,000 from sugar. And at the same time, you have this major conference to be able to attract investors and so on. Now, the actual purpose of the conference, when you read the agenda and so on, so not beating the conference, we're not beating the government to hold a conference, but a conference which appears in content, substance and form, to be a distraction from what is going on in the rest of society, and a distraction from what has been a concern about the agreement the famous agreement that has been signed between the government of Guyana and Exxon and its partners, which was kept secret for over 14 months. And then, of course, we then learned about the 18 million US dollars that's been put into an account, an interest-bearing account at the Bank of Guyana and not the consolidated fund. So that the government's free to have conferences as it likes. But when these conferences are expensive extravaganzas in the face of other people suffering, we have a moral problem with this. Secondly, when you look at the conference program, and by the way, I was invited to the opening, not to the 3 days. So we don't know what would happen in 3 days, the 3 days of the conference. But the opening, I did not go. But you have a lot of speechifying. And of course, one of the speakers was supposed to be His Excellency the President. He was billed to go and speak between 11:30 and 11:50, and apparently I understand it was a no-show. So I don't know what that means. I don't know why he didn't go, because you had all these ministers and represented the private sector and one of the GIPEX organizers. This is the Valiant Business Media UK, and then you had the Vice President of Exxon Mobil Development Company speaking, and so forth. And then, of course, as I said, the Sagacity is the one who's been organizing the PR. However, what is unclear when you look at the whatever little you can get out of the conference in the preparations, this is a government that has signed an agreement that we don't know what the Sovereign Welfare Fund will be. They have been talking about this, but there's no clarity on this issue. Again, they're talking about these issues for months and months. The Petroleum Commission bill, which they submitted and then sent to a select committee, has not met since July last year. The minister has said, Trotman has said over and over again in the press, after many exposures, that the bill gave extraordinary wide scope and discretion to the minister whilst you are having this commission to manage the petroleum sector. And he says, yes, it will be, I will bring amendments, I will amend it. Well, two things. He either has to bring amendments to the floor of the House, or he has to convene a meeting of the committee and put the amendments there. Between July and as of today, no such thing has happened. So is that guff? Is he just fluffing as usual and the emptiness of many of his words? So no committee meeting, and the commission sitting, the bill is sitting there. And no change, despite many people saying that this is a very bad bill that gives excessive powers to one minister of the government. He determines everything. So that's one issue that, of course, if you're having a GIPEX big conference, the issues of the legal framework of the sector is important. And also what is the issue relating to the bill that is supposed to guide and manage and monitor the agreement with Exxon and an agreement with any other oil companies. Then we have the Sovereign Welfare Fund. Again, there's no clarity, as I said earlier, on how this fund will be created, how it will be, what kind of model are they using. He has made, again, many statements, but again, there's nothing substantial, it's just fluff. Then we have the local content policy. Again, there's no clarity. And this is like the Green State Development Strategy. We've been hearing about it for almost 3 years. But they keep talking that there's a framework for it and that there's some multi-stakeholder expert group. Who's on that, we don't know. But there's no clarity on the focus. What are the priorities? How do what we do in the Green State Development Strategy relate to the oil industry and the agreements we made at COP21 that we would become a country that is 100% alternative energy by 2025. How do those things interweave and become not just words, but programmatical possibilities to be implemented by the country? And of course, we've talked about the Exxon agreement over and over here. We've talked about it. But I want to remind you of something, and that is that because I think everyone's forgotten about it, that in 2016, we were in Parliament one night, and around 7 o'clock, there was a bill, an amendment bill, that was suddenly put on the floor. Now, it's very unusual that a bill is circulated near 7 o'clock at night. It usually is circulated when you first come in the House. And at that point, when it was being circulated, this was a bill to amend the laws to ensure that Exxon and its partners would not have to pay corporate tax, income tax, and other taxes, etc., indefinitely. So we thought, okay, they've circulated 7 o'clock, then we'll have a chance to look at it. Next thing we know, Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu jumps up and goes to call for a waiver of this or suspension of the standing orders to allow this bill, amendment bill, that has been presented at 7 o'clock, circulated 7 o'clock, to go through all three stages that night. Well, of course, it was a big uproar, and it was done, of course, by the majority, the government. I spoke on it to point out that we didn't know what the agreement was, why were these concessions being given, etc., without no clarity on what is the agreement with Exxon, etc. And of course, as I said, it was passed. But this was also on the eve when later on, when the contract came out, the agreement came out 14 months later, then we saw the synchronization of the date of the contract, of the agreement, with this commitment by the government to do the taxes being, Exxon, etc., would not be getting taxed. So this conference, from our point of view, is a distraction from all the problems the government has proven over and over again that is incapable of handling. Now, yesterday evening, now let me just give you some further information, and that is that apparently there was some photo that was being released showing Mr. Granger sitting there with Mr. Harman, etc., saying that looking as if we didn't turn up for the meeting with Mr. Granger. Well, we're not rude in that way. I'm sorry. If we weren't going, we would have said we weren't going. Let me tell you the story. When we met in January, the agreement was that we'd meet on February the 7th. A date was not fixed. However, a time was not fixed. However, around 3 o'clock would be convenient, but as normal, this is a president you're dealing with, and normally between different parties, it would be a confirmation of the time. So, as of yesterday morning, we had nothing from the office of the president saying, one, if the meeting was on or when it was on. And by midday, when we heard nothing, we then sent our letters to the president in response to the issues that were supposed to be discussed. One of these had to do with the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, in which we said, and this I'm quoting Mr. Jack Dale, as promised, I've done the requisite due diligence. It is with deep regret that I inform you that I am unable to offer my agreement to the appointment of Mr. Justice Kenneth Andrew Charles Benjamin as Chancellor of Judiciary and Madam Justice Yonette Decina Cummings Edwards OR as Chief Justice. Please be informed that I remain cognizant of the fundamental importance of securing substantive appointments to these two high-level constitutional offices. As a result, I am committed to continuous engagement with Your Excellency until there is due compliance with Article 127(1) of the Constitution. So, this is the part of the Constitution that is unambiguous. The President can only appoint the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, having obtained the agreement of the Leader of the Opposition. So this isn't about the slight ambiguity which the President claimed and the Office of the President claimed about the appointment of the Patterson as Chairman of the GCOM. This is where it's unambiguously clear. And when, of course, the Integrity Commission, we were given 4 names by the President. We have pointed out that the consultation as defined in the law has been completed, and that we are satisfied with that. So we have not We are not required to agree or not agree to the names put forward by the President. We are just saying that I consider the totality, he says, of our engagement on this issue to be in satisfaction of the requirements of consultation as contemplated by the letter and spirit of Section 3 of the Integrity Act. And then, of course, the Teaching Service Commission, where the President has 3 nominees in his own right. And we had raised with him in January, at the January 3rd meeting, that the 3 persons, we had a practice with Mr. Corbyn as leader of opposition that he would provide a name, and that name would be one of the 3 persons that the President would appoint. We didn't get clarity from the President on this issue. We had raised it on the January 3rd meeting. They had promised to inform us officially of their position. We didn't hear that, but we indicated we're still ready to nominate someone, and that if the President no longer does not wish to go in this direction of having this mechanism which operated with Mr. Corbyn and Mr. Jagdeo, that the requirements of meaningful consultation as contemplated in Article 232 have been complied with. So, funny enough, so we heard nothing during the morning. We sent all these letters around midday, before 1 o'clock. They reached the opposition, the President, and then suddenly we started getting calls after 4 o'clock from Mr. Harman's office saying that we wish to have you confirm that you're coming at 5 o'clock. And we said, we know nothing about this. And that is when Mr. Jagdeo also spoke to Mr. Harman. So we don't know anything about a 5 o'clock appointment. And therefore, that is why we put out a statement in relation to this photograph, because by then they knew that we didn't know there was a 5 o'clock appointment, and therefore were unable to make it. None of us were dressed appropriately to go before the President. And so there was no issue of being disrespectful to the President. It was an issue that, for some reason, maybe they didn't want to meet with us. But this was a PR stunt pulled by Office of the President to show the President sitting, waiting in a room with 3 persons opposite. Whatever our disagreements are with the government and APNO and AFC, the PPP has never not shown respect and deference to the office of the person who holds the office of the President when we are in meeting such situations. So that we have, therefore, clarified that issue, and that we therefore cannot avoid what is going on in Guyana. Today, we're talking about other contributing factors to this downward spiral of our country. Again, of the infractions on constitutional laws, infractions on transparency and accountability. These are concerns of our people. People want to have public knowledge available to them, not as if you're extracting teeth. Once the public feels that they can't know something, which is not top secret, obviously, these are not matters of national security, that the people have a right to know it. There's nothing, these are issues to do with our national patrimony. So our patrimony, that is our oil and natural resources, all our resources, are the interest and the importance for the public. So that we will now, we started late today, and I apologize for that, but we in the PPP believe very strongly that transparency and accountability, obedience to the constitutional laws of our country, these are 2 critical areas. And so we believe that the government is operating in bad faith many times, that it is not coming with clarity on a number of these issues, and whether it's their incompetence or ineptitude, or really you have various forces fighting against each other for control, one isn't sure. But the point is that our patrimony, our assets as a people, including sugar assets, including forest assets, including our oil and gas, are being frittered away in a level of incompetence and secrecy which we don't accept. And by the way, Mr. Harman promised during the budget debate, after all the uproar to do with the length of time it took to make the Exxon agreement public, was that all the other agreements to do with oil would be made public before the end of the year. That is end of 2017. As of now, nothing has been revealed. 2 months into the new year, and still we have not heard and have not had exposed the new agreements, the agreements which we haven't seen. So that these are promises that are falling. The government is making promises and not complying and not adhering and upholding the contracts that they are making to the people. If it is that they learned a lesson to do with, after having kept the Exxon agreement quiet for so long, then surely they must have learned that when they made the promise that all the other oil contracts would be made public before the end of 2017, that in fact they should have adhered to that promise. And again, they've failed. More promises not being succeeded. And so, my dear friends, we will close our day today, and that we hope that this session has been of interest to you. We hope too that you, the Guyanese public, will enjoy your weekend, enjoy your time with your families, etc., and that no drinking and driving, please. We've seen some terrible accidents and terrible fatalities, and of course many people don't recognize it. Many people are injured, may not die, but they are badly maimed and damaged and injured for the rest of their lives. And so no drinking and driving, cut down speeding. If they says 50 miles an hour, you go 50 miles an hour. I know it can be a strain, but people's lives, especially children's lives, are of critical importance. And sometimes I see people riding very, very fast with children in the cars or in the minibuses. And I beg you to please remember those precious cargo that you're carrying belong to other people, and that these are their loved ones. So no drinking and driving, my friends, and we will be meeting back again next Thursday. And struggle we shall, and silent we shall not be. Silence is the greatest enemy to democracy. Silence makes those in power think they can get away with anything. Silence helps those who want more control and less democracy, those who want to move this country to a police state. And in the next elections, the people will make their votes count again, and there will be a change, and we in the PPC government shall have to start all over again as in 1992 to reconstruct, to put this economy back on a firm and stable footing, and restore the programs which help the poor and vulnerable and those at risk, and restore the independence of the judiciary and legislature from executive interference. Have a great weekend, stay safe, and we'll meet each other again next Thursday right here at 12:30 to 1:30. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.